Hey gang, it's Squill, and in this episode, Fionna and Cake becomes a show about time travel? The Butterfly and the River is the 5th episode of Fionna and Cake's 2nd season. The butterfly refers to not only the butterfly that Cake spares and then eventually kills, but possibly also baby Finn from the future with his butterfly wings. And the river refers to the river inside the tree that Huntress and Cake go down, possibly symbolizing the fluidity of fate. This episode opens with a Marshall and Hannah flashback, showcasing the ways in which she creatively stifled him. It's not an amazing way to begin the episode, but I think it does a good enough job at establishing the conflict between Marshall and Hannah that becomes relevant both in this episode and later on in the season. This is followed by our first and only flashback between Marshall and Simone. I expressed criticism of this storyline in my last review, but I do think that this moment is done decently well. You get a good sense of why Marshall would gravitate towards Simone. She's someone who nurtures Marshall's creativity as opposed to his mom who stifles it. I think my issue though is that this is the only scene we get between the two before they reunite, and as such, it doesn't really do a ton to get me invested in the storyline. Simone is fine, but I don't really get much characterization from her outside of just being generally nice. I can't really tell if she's supposed to be more like Simon or Ice King, but she doesn't really feel like either to me. And we don't really see much of her dynamic with Marshall at all, meaning that I just can't bring myself to care about them. The only other aspect of the scene worthy of note is that we get our first Rebecca Sugar song of the season, with Memories. We get a bit of it here with Simone, and then hear a bit more later on with Marshall. I like the bits we get of it in this episode, but man, it is such a missed opportunity that Marshall and Simone don't play it together in full later on in the season. Would have been the perfect callback to I Remember You. There is a full version of the song in the Season 2 album, sung by Rebecca Sugar, and it's absolutely wonderful, but it's a shame that we didn't get that in the show itself. The episode proper picks up on Fionna, Cake, and Huntress Wizard as they wake up in Cake's apartment. I love that Cake's apartment is just full of dressers for her to sleep in, very fun. Huntress basically threatens Fionna into taking her to the oldest tree in the city, and from there we cut to another character's apartment, Gary's. I like getting to see a bit of Gary's controlling side here. It makes him feel a bit closer in personality to PB. And while the two were undeniably cute together in Season 1, it is really nice to see a bit of conflict in their relationship, with Gary reminding Marshall all too much of his mom. Speaking of which, Gary invites Marshall to meet his parents, to which he hesitantly accepts. Back in the main plot, Fionna and Cake take Huntress to the oldest tree in the city, and I love that it's modeled after Finn and Jake's treehouse. I always assumed Fionna's apartment was just her equivalent to the treehouse, but I love this way more. I like seeing Huntress cut her hand off again, like in the cold open to the crocodile who bit a log. Cake's reaction, just being a deadpanned girl, is probably my favorite joke in the episode. Fionna is eventually pulled away from this plot to give dating advice to Marshall and Gary. It's really fun the way this sequence is edited, constantly cutting back and forth between Gary and Marshall. Kinda makes me wish the show explored Fiona's relationship with the two a bit more. Back with Cake and Huntress, Cake gets a text from Emkron asking for a redo of their date, to which she accidentally stands him up on by the end of the episode. When I was first watching the season, I was getting kind of annoyed by how little the show was developing Cake and Emkron's relationship. Those feelings are lessened a little bit by the fact that Cake and Emkron don't actually end up together by the end of the season. But much like with Marshall and Simone, this Cake and Emkron storyline just feels like such wasted potential to me. Not because they don't end up together, but because they barely get any screen time. It would have been cool to get a version of Jake and Lady's relationship where we actually see the two develop together on screen. I even think the two not ending up together is a cool subversion. Even after the pups were born, Jake and Lady's relationship was always pretty status quo in Adventure Time. It was cute, but more or less a background element. So it would have been cool to see an actual storyline about a version of these characters, but unfortunately we barely get that. Anyways, when trying to activate the tree, Huntress crosses her eyes in a way that reminds me a lot of Finn, Jake, and Peppermint Butler doing so in Death and Bloom to open the portal to the land of the dead. Cake and Huntress get zapped inside the tree, and with that, we cut back to Fiona's subplot. Here, we see her meeting with DJ Flame as he agrees to help her with the fundraiser. You see, a lot of people shit on DJ Flame, and it's not completely unwarranted, but I do get the vibe that he's being sincere here, even if he might also want to get back with Fionna. In Felix's apartment, we are introduced to one of the Marshmallow Kids. Really inspired decision to depict him with vitiligo. Back with Huntress and Cake, the two wake up inside the tree, with Cake attached to Huntress's arm. This makes for a really funny visual. Speaking of visuals, I love how this place looks, very aesthetically pleasing on the eyes. Anyway, Cake and Huntress go through one of the portals, and we cut to classic Fionna world. Love the little music stain they play here, reminiscent of the original Adventure Time intro. Much like in The Lion of Embers, we see this version of Fionna world transform into modern Fionna world, showing that there isn't really an exact moment in which Fionna world changed, rather that it was just retconned into having always been this city. We see this again later in the episode with Marshall. Speaking of Marshall, we cut back to his subplot in which he meets Gary's parents. I love just how sweet the princes are, they're very wholesome characters. According to this concept art by Tom Herpich, they're apparently based off of these bruised banana guards from Bonnie and Nettie, which I honestly wouldn't have guessed in a million years. I thought they were supposed to be the mother gum at first. Oh, and they also call Gary Bubba. No comment. But for real, I really love the subplot. It's my favorite part of the episode, and probably my favorite thing the show has done with Gary and Marshall so far. This is really the only episode of the season to actually say something about Gary as a character. I've seen a lot of people criticize him for not really being like PB at all, but I really like the context that this episode provides for his upbringing. That this is a version of PB who grew up with a nurturing family, compared to our Bonnie, who essentially had to raise herself and Nettie, whose only adult figures in her life were literally created by her and also ended up betraying her. Speaking of Nettie, even though she only appears for a few seconds, I like what they did with Nellie here. Her design is very cute. I also like what this adds to Marshall's arc, letting him see what a healthy family life is like. I like them reminding him of Simone while he's playing the memory song. Back with Huntress and Cake, we get that Marshall flashback I mentioned earlier. I don't think this moment between him and Hannah really adds anything to the episode. We already know she was strict on him, just feels a little redundant. We also see the Fionna world version of Ed the Spider from Web Weirdos of all characters, in what I think is the first time that episode's ever been referenced again. Cake promptly kills her. We then jump 1,000 years into the future, where Fionna world is completely taken over by butterfly creatures, and where baby Finn is a butterfly slayer, making him not only immortal, but also permanently a baby. This is honestly kinda awesome. I think I'd kill for a full episode about this dystopian future. Like the line Huntress has after this about killing the spider being in Cake's nature, it adds to her identity crisis arc this season. Back with Marshall and Gary, we get their final scene of the episode, where Marshall opens up to Gary about him being a little bit controlling. I really like this conflict because it's not some big, dramatic, multi-episode story arc. It's just a little bump in their relationship that they talk about. It's very sweet, and highlights just how well the two work off each other. After this, we catch up on Fiona's plot, where she encounters Queenie trying to tear down the sweet spot. I really like the scene because of how much it plays into Fiona's self-destructiveness, upping her goal from 50k to 70k. I also like this mini panic attack she has right after, showing that she's not as confident about her choices as she lets on. This is followed by Fionna catching Damon, a spy sent to stalk Marshall by Hannah, who we've actually been seeing in the background for a few episodes now. Fiona's side to this episode ends on a cliffhanger as Damon takes her to confront Hannah. Back with Cake and Huntress, the pair spot a possible future in which Fionna is working for Hannah, foreshadowing that she may be headed down a dark path. After this, Huntress and Cake make their way out of the tree. I love the freaky imagery here of Huntress vomiting out Cake. It's so bizarre. Cake brutally killing the butterfly is very funny, and also does a good job foreshadowing the theme of changing fate that's so prevalent throughout the second half of the season. The episode then ends on our first and only ooh scene, where Simon, PB, and Marcy use the demonic wishing eye. I like getting to see Wishy again, and I'm glad they bring back the art style from Bananas, but otherwise, this is easily my least favorite scene of the episode. I already talked about in my last video how strange it is that Simon seemed to be so secretive about the demonic wishing eye, only for them to just casually use it with no drama. But, just like with Prismo, Wishy ends up being completely useless, which definitely aids in making most of the ooze stuff in the middle chunk of the season feel like a complete waste of time. But, on top of that, this is also where we see Finn begin to age rapidly, which is a plot point that always felt so cheap to me. It was clearly done because anyone who's seen Together Again knows Finn doesn't die until he's an old man. So by aging Finn up, the show is trying to convince us that Finn is actually going to die. Of course, this didn't work on me at all, because we see Peppermint Butler in Together Again, who looks and acts nothing like he does in Season 2 of Fionna and Cake. But also because it just wouldn't make narrative sense given Huntress' arc this season. I do get the decision made here. When you already start the season with Finn on his deathbed, it's hard to escalate further from there. Which leads me to believe that they should have just started the season with Finn being sick and then escalated to him being on his deathbed. And that was The Butterfly and the River, and despite a kinda bad last minute or so, I actually quite like this one overall. This one sorta has the same problem as the last episode, where it's jumping between a few different storylines at once, but I feel like the individual stories get a bit more time to breathe here. It was nice to get some Huntress action again, even though I wish she got a little more development here. And the Marshall and Gary stuff in this one is one of my favorite subplots in the entire season. Please let me know your thoughts on this episode in the comments, and I'll see you all next time for The Bird in the Clock. Squill out.